I knew something was wrong the second I stepped into the lobby and the receptionist couldn't bring herself to look at me. Not a glance, not a flicker. Her eyes were locked on a thin crack in the marble floor like it was holding her hostage. I hadn't even set my purse down before my phone vibrated. Outlook notification. One sharp ping. Urgent performance review. 9:15 a.m. Confirm 4C. All caps. No body, no signature. Clean, cold, cute. Let me rewind for a second. 12 consecutive quarters of growth. 12. We'd closed the Hastings account 3 weeks earlier, projected $28 million in revenue over the next 3 years. I'd built that deal from a napkin sketch at 30,000 feet on a Delta flight, but now I'm being summoned like I stole someone's yogurt from the break room fridge. When you've worked in finance long enough, you develop a sixth sense. A low hum in your spine when something ugly is coming. When the air shifts, when the vultures start circling. And my spine was screaming. Corinne's office door was cracked as I passed. She was whispering to someone, using that syrupy sympathy voice she saves for firings. The same tone she used on Jenny from accounting when she said her role had evolved beyond scope. Corporate, for we replaced you with a 22-year-old who owns a ring light and has a stepdad on the board. I took the long way to the meeting room, not fear, strategy. I needed time to breathe, to scan the halls, to count who couldn't meet my eyes. A few heads snapped away too fast. One guy I'd mentored for 5 years actually ducked into the copy room. That's when it clicked. This wasn't a review. This was an execution. I slipped into my office and opened the locked drawer. My original contract. 8 pages of legal language, 3 renegotiated after Q4 last year. I flipped straight to clause 11C, read it once, then again. Ran my finger over the initials, Corinne's, Brian's, mine, still there. My parachute, my kill switch, my insurance against exactly the kind of amateur hour stunt they were about to pull. I folded the papers, slid them into my leather portfolio, stood up, adjusted my jacket, smiled once into the mirror, then walked out. If you've made it this far, if you're even a little curious how this ends in the most expensive, public, irreversible way possible, go ahead and hit subscribe, maybe drop a like. Watching their downfall in 4K deserves applause. Back in the hallway, I passed the mural the CEO commissioned after our Series D closed. A glowing shrine to innovation. Funny how none of the women who actually closed the deal made the wall. Just stock photo models in VR, goggles pretending to be visionaries. Conference room 4C had its blinds drawn. Corinne sat inside, stiff-backed, flanked by 2 HR reps who looked like they'd just dry-swallowed thumbtacks. No laptops, no water, no reports, no discussion. Just the guillotine, waiting. Victoria, Corinne said, wearing a grimace she wanted to pass off as empathy. Thanks for joining on such short notice. Of course, I said. I always make time for my team. Nobody smiled. She gestured to the chair. I didn't sit. A single sheet of paper lay in front of her, typed, 1 page. I'd bet my 401k. It was my termination notice. Corinne cleared her throat like she was about to announce a death. I'll get right to it. We're restructuring. And unfortunately, your position is being eliminated effective immediately. This decision is final and approved by leadership. Leadership. Brian, who couldn't even bother to show his boyish, borrowed authority. I nodded. Calm. No tears. No protest. Understood. Corinne blinked. That wasn't the reaction she wanted. She'd expected a breakdown, maybe a plea. Poor thing. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I'll need your badge, she added, almost apologetic. I handed it over, smiled. And just like that, I was no longer an executive at Arcshire Financial. Except that wasn't true. Not yet. Because what Corinne didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that firing me one day before my bonus vested didn't save money. It triggered clause 11C, which meant they didn't owe me $4 million. They owed me double. Plus damages. They'd find out soon enough. I left conference room 4C like I was heading to lunch. Calm. Collected. Pink slip in hand like it was a receipt. Corinne stayed behind, probably sweating through her blazer, praying I wouldn't make a scene. HR didn't follow me. They just sat there like mannequins in a discount suit store waiting for their next restructure. I passed my office without looking. They box my things. Or toss them in a closet and pretend I was never there. That's how this game works. You don't build empires. You get rented by them. Then discarded when your value outpaces your obedience. What Karenin especially. Brian never understood was that I never played by their rules. I just let them think I did. Instead of heading for the garage, I swiped into the executive elevator and punched 45. Legal and compliance. I'd spent enough time up there during Hastings to know who still had a soul behind their NDA-stamped eyes. The receptionist barely looked up until I dropped my folder on her desk. Tell Aaron Patel I'm here. Do you have an appointment? I just got fired, I said, smiling. He'll want to see me. Aaron used to shadow me in negotiations. Smart, sharp. Once asked if he should go private sector or rot in corporate. I told him to stay long enough to learn where the bodies were buried and who buried them. 10 minutes later, he closed his office door. Are you okay? They let me go, I said. Effective immediately. No cause, no severance beyond. Standard, no mention of the incentive clause. His brow furrowed. Which clause? I opened the folder. Flipped the page. Clause 11C, paragraph 3, subsection A. He read it once. Then again, slower. His expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. They initialed every page, I said. Brian even asked about the multiplier. Aaron leaned back. Victoria. This clause is airtight. They fired me within 24 hours of vesting, I said. So they owe full bonus, 50% of base, plus damages if contested. He let out a soft, horrified laugh. They thought termination voided it. It activates it. This is going to melt faces upstairs. I'm not here for revenge, I said. I'm here for enforcement. You want this escalated? Quietly, from you. He nodded. Took photos. Scanned everything. As I stood, I said, the wrong side isn't the one who reports this. It's the one who thought I'd roll over. I wasn't done yet. On 43, 2 interns whispered over iced coffees like they'd seen a ghost. Word travels fast when the queen falls. In the elevator, I adjusted my collar, smoothed my hair. Took a breath. They thought they buried me. But I wasn't dead. I was loaded with paper and signatures. Legal smelled like toner and burnt ambition. I found Sarah exactly where I hoped. She looked up, startled. You heard right, I said, handing her the folder. She opened it slowly. Karen signed this? Page 6. Time-stamped. Her mouth fell open. This triggers everything. I highlighted it. They thought you wouldn't notice. They thought wrong. Sarah nodded, resolve locking into place. I'll take it to Meredith now. As I turned to leave, she asked, what if they bury it? They can try, I said. But it's already backed up, and 1 copy emails the board if they touch my record. Her jaw dropped. They like to pretend I was a file folder in heels. I let them. I walked out like I owned the floor. Quiet exits fool people. They assumed defeat, but that morning, I wasn't leaving broken. I was leaving the building booby-trapped. And someone had already tripped the wire. Karen stormed into the HR war room like she was auditioning for a panic attack. Red-faced, rapid blinking, already sweating through the silk lining of her blazer. She didn't even shut the door behind her, just slammed her laptop on the table and barked, we need documentation now. Across the table, Shell from HR blinked like a turtle yanked from a pond. Documentation of what exactly? Victoria's termination. Something that shows we had just caused a waiver, a write-up, an incident log, anything. Shelley typed with 2 fingers, scrolling through an empty folder like it might magically populate with HR miracles. Karen, she's never even had a formal warning or a verbal coaching note. She's clean. Karen threw her hands up. There has to be something. She's building a case. She walked out of here way too calm, and now legal as she stopped herself. Shell's brow furrowed. Legal as what? Never mind. Karen snapped. Just keep looking. Downstairs in compliance, a quiet alarm had already started to ring. Sarah had passed the folder to Meredith, the board's lead counsel, who read it once, turned the color of skim milk, and requested a discreet but immediate review of Victoria's employment history, contract amendments, and compensation triggers. Meanwhile, Karen was now dialing extensions like her career depended on it, which incidentally it did. Jerry, it's Karen, she said into her phone. I need all the emails tied to Victoria's 4 renegotiation. Contracts, internal approvals, equity schedules, everything. What do you mean it's archived? Then you archive it. At that same moment, Victoria was packing. This was a $6.5 million trigger wrapped in arrogance and fired like a starter pistol. One of the committee members cleared his throat. Is this enforceable? Beyond enforceable, Meredith said she has timestamps, backups, email trails, and Merida. Her termination was additionally 37 minutes after she submitted her clause to legal and compliance. That creates the impression legally and publicly of retaliation. Brian muttered something under his breath and pushed his chair back like he was about to walk out. Meredith raised her voice. Sit down. He froze. He'd never heard her speak to him like that before. Meredith walked slowly to the touchscreen at the head of the table, tapped in a command, and brought up a document on the A80 in display. The original equity agreement scanned, digitally signed. She zoomed in. Clause 11C. In the event of involuntary or constructive termination within 24 hours preceding a scheduled equity vestingement, the subject shall be entitled to full vesting acceleration, immediate payout at current market value, and additional compensation calculated at 1.5x base salary. Arbitration shall be waived at the employee's sole discretion. A silence fell so loud it roared. Who the hell approved that clause? Someone whispered. Meredith tapped again. A signature line filled the screen. Board Chair Lawrence Drayton. The room let out a collective groan. Brian's eyes went wide. Wait. Lawrence signed that. He did. Meredith said back in 2019. Before Close Series B, Victoria wrote the clause as retention insurance. Lawrence agreed it was fair given her role in structuring our early compliance infrastructure. It sat untouched for 3 years, and now it's about to cost us the GDP of a small nation. Karen, barely above a whisper, why didn't we catch it? Meredith's voice dropped to a deadly calm. Because you never read the fine print. You were too focused on headlines and handshakes. Meanwhile, Victoria was writing her escape plan in plain sight. In ink with your initials, the committee shifted uneasily. Someone finally diretto asked, Is there a fix? Meredith shook her head. No clean one. If we try to settle now, it'll signal guilt. If we go to court, we'll lose. If we stall, she can escalate to the board. If we try to retroactively justify the firing, she's got version control data on every document, including yours, Brian, locked in her personal legal archive. She's been 10 steps ahead since the moment she handed you her badge. Brian slumped back in his chair. What does she want? Meredith stared at him. She doesn't want anything. That's the part you still don't get. She doesn't need anything. She already won. The call came in just after noon while Victoria was sitting alone in the rooftop garden of her condo building. Her phone buzzed once, then again. She didn't recognize the number, but she knew who it was before she even touched the screen. There was a specific lever of corporate panic that only came from the upper echelons, the kind that vibrated through glass and steel and bonus structures. She answered on the second ring, calm as ever. Victoria Owens, she said, sipping her tea. Victoria. The voice said, cool and composed, but just slightly frayed around the edges. It's David Halpern. From the board, she smiled faintly. Halpern had once offered her a position at a rival firm directly, discreetly, and with enough zeros to make her pause. He'd always had a decent radar for where the real power lived in a company. Ange suspected that's exactly what prompted this call. David, she said warmly, to what do I owe the pleasure? I'll get to it, he said. Did you intend to trigger Clause 11C? She didn't even blink. They terminated me. It just made sure I left a paper trail. A silence thick and thoughtful. She let it hang. I've read the clause, he said finally. The annotations your timestamps? Frankly, it's one of the cleanest risk shields I've ever seen embedded in an incentive package. I had good mentors, she said. Some of them on your board.
He chuckled under his breath, not joy.
Admiration edged with dread. Brian's still insisting it was an oversight. I'm sure he is. Corinne's claiming she never understood the multiplier. She understood enough to sign it twice and push it through without review. Victoria replied that memo she sent on December 14th. I flagged the language in bold, underlined. Her initials are on the margin, time-stamped, metadata intact. Christ, David muttered. Another pause, then a different voice entered the background. Muffled but urgent. David, she didn't just trigger the payout. There's a secondary multiplier tied to the equity value ratio. Just recalculated it. Victoria waited, listening to the scramble like it was symphony. 6.4 million, the voice said. Possibly more depending on the market value recalibration at the time of termination. David came back on. Our CFO just confirmed what legal was afraid of, because of the clause's reference to unvested equity and the 1.5x multiplier. Your payout is actually above 6 million. Victoria didn't respond immediately. She was watching a pigeon pace along the railing like it was conducting a board meeting of its own. David, she said calmly, you're not calling to debate the payout. You're calling to assess the fallout. I'm calling, he admitted, because Corinne is about to be thrown to the wolves and Brian's pretending he can't hear the howling. Meredith wants to settle, but you haven't made a move. No counter-offer, no statement, no lawyer. Why? Victoria leaned back in her chair. Because I don't need to. I played this by the book. I wrote the book. They just forgot I never stopped editing it. David exhaled long and low. They'll ask for arbitration. They can request it, she replied. The clause gives me solid discretion to decline. Litigation? She shrugged. They'll lose. The documentation's airtight and they know it. That's why Meredith hasn't reached out directly. She's buying time, hoping I flinch. You won't, he said quietly. I haven't yet. Soft laugh. You know, Victoria, you always struck me as too composed for this business, too methodical. But watching this unfold, I realized now that you weren't calm because you lacked fire. You were calm because you knew where every fuse was buried. That's why they hired me, she said. And why they shouldn't have fired me. The line went quiet for a moment. Then David said, I assume you'll be getting counsel involved eventually. I already did, she said 3 years ago. And I wrote Clause 11C click end call. She didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She simply looked up at the sky and watched the clouds pass overhead. 6 million was never the point. Not really. The point was they built an empire on her spine and thought they could kick it out from under themselves without consequences. But Victoria wasn't angry. She was precise, and precision always finds its target. The executive suite was desolate, unnaturally so. The kind of silence you only get after the last champagne bottle's been emptied. Aunt Simeon finally notices the floor's on fire. Everyone had been summoned. No agenda, no coffee, just a hastily booked leadership sink that smelled more like a trial than a meeting. Brian sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, arms crossed like a teenager sent to detention. Corinne sat to his left, visibly trembling. Legal pad in front offer with nothing written, but the word defensible in 5 different styles of handwriting. The CFO was ghost pale. The head of HR looked like she was rethinking every career choice she'd made since college. And the only person moving with purpose was Meredith Lee, lead counsel and currently the only adult in the room. She dropped the packet on the table like a gavel. You've all read Clause 11C? She began, but allow me to read it aloud one final time so there is no further misunderstanding about what has just occurred. She didn't wait for permission. In the event of involuntary or constructive termination within 24 hours preceding a scheduled equity vesting event, the subject shall be entitled to full equity acceleration, compensation equivalent to 1.5x base salary and associated damages as calculated under the pre-approved performance incentive plan. Employer waives arbitration in the case of demonstrable bad faith dismissal. She closed the file, slowly removed her glasses, and turned to Brian like a firing squad lining up its first shot. Brian, her voice was low and cracking. Please tell me you paid her. Brian blinked. Excuse me, Meredith stood straighter. Tell me right now that you sued her the bonus before the termination went through. He shifted in his seat. We terminated her before it vested. That was the point. The room went still. Jesus Christ, Meredith whispered. I mean, he added, palms up. If we fire her before the bonus vests, we don't have to pay it. That's how these things work. Everyone knows that. No, Meredith snapped loud enough to make Karen flinch. That's how you think it works. That clause wasn't written to avoid payment. It was written to protect the employee from exactly that kind of maneuver. The CFO looked up now, eyes haunted. You've already received a notice of intention to collect damages. It came through 2 hours ago. Her counsel submitted a certified statement with backup files, timestamps, internal emails, everything. Brian scoffed. So what? We counter-negotiate. Offer half no. Meredith said you don't negotiate with someone holding a loaded contract and a detonator in the other hand. Shadow sent need to talk. She just has to wait. And right now board is demanding to know why you authorized a termination without legal review or just caused documentation inside a protected clause window. Brian's smirk was fading now. Okay, so we pay her the bonus. Worst case $4 million. Meredith turned to the CFO. Tell him. The CFO's face was grim. With the equity recalculations, performance triggers, and multiplier clause. Karen let out a strangled whisper. Multiplier? The CFO nodded. It's single quotes. It's not 4 million, it's 6.5, and that's before damages. Brian leaned back in his chair like he'd just been hit with a sledgehammer. You can't be serious. She even submitted the meeting transcript from the Q4 session where you dismissed her clause concerns on record. Meredith added, we're talking about a paper trail that might as well be written in blood. Brian looked around, suddenly aware that no one was coming to his defense. VP of Operations cleared his throat. So what happens now? Meredith took a long, slow breath. Now the board reviews the breach. They'll likely foresee a full payout to Victoria and issue a vote on restitution. If they deem it malicious, she turned to Brian, staring straight into his soul. They'll hold you personally liable. Karen looked like she might throw up. HR began quietly packing her things. The CFO rubbed his temples like he was trying to press reality out of his skull. Brian finally found his voice again. She planned this. She set us up. Meredith's eyes narrowed. She protected herself. And you walk it straight into the clause she warned you about. She didn't hide it. You just never read it. Silence fell again. Colder this time. Heavier. The kind of silence you feel in your teeth. Then the board's secretary opened the door hesitant. Eyes wide. Apologies, she said. The chair is requesting your presence. All of you. Immediately. Meredith didn't move. She turned to Brian one last time. This wasn't a mistake. It was a master class, and you failed every test. Then she stood, gathered the contract packet, and walked out without waiting for him. Brian didn't move. Karen didn't breathe. The wolves were no longer howling. They were inside the building. The skyline outside Victoria's Austin hotel room was all glass, cranes, and ambition. Every tower trying to outshine the next like a prom queen contest made of steel. She stood barefoot on the balcony in a robe that cost more than her first apartment rent. Phone in one hand, a cool glass of something dangerously floral in the other. A notification pinged softly from her inbox. Subject settlement packager and financial from external counsel on behalf of Board of Directors attachment. Final settlement agreement payment confirmation, $6,586,250 and 0 cents note. Please review and return signed NDA within 5 business days. No public disclosure permitted without express board consent. Shouldn't open the NDA. Didn't need to. The numbers were there. The payment was real. The damage already done. Her old company hadn't even managed to spin it. No press release. No new direction announcement. Just a quiet purge disguised as restructuring. Karen was already gone, resigned to pursue new opportunities for the company internet. Everyone inside knew it was a mercy killing. As for Brian, reassigned, that was the word they chose. Rumor had it Hugh is now leading innovation initiatives in a newly invented department that had neither a budget nor an office. Last week, one of her old team members leaked a photo of his new title badge. Read, Executive Liaison, Internal Alignment, Translation, Exiled without ceremony. Victoria didn't return any of the voicemails. Not Meredith's, not Sarah's, not even. David Halpern's last-minute olive branch offered to connect her with some advisory boards. She didn't need their handshakes. She already had their signatures and she was busy. Busy meeting with the executive team at Westridge Capital, who flew her in after hearing whispers about how she sank a CEO with a single clause. They weren't firing her for a role. They were offering her a seat at the table. Partner track, strategy, division, autonomy, equity, a pen, not just a signature line. But tonight wasn't about negotiations. Tonight was about punctuation. She sat down on a lounge by the rooftop pool, kicked her feet up, and took a picture. Sand-colored tile beneath her toes. Drink perched beside her with a ridiculous garnish poking out. In the background, the city gleamed like a $1,000,000 apology. She opened her texts, scrolled until she found the last saved number from her Arcton days. The board chair typed one sentence, Clause 11C, line 22, then attached the photo. No caption, no emoji, just the final word. Line 22, I think you have forgotten. Was the clause's closing statement written in her own phrasing when legal let her adjust. The language after 2 late-night calls and a bottle of wine. Failure to honor the terms herein shall constitute not only breach, but a systemic lapse in judgment subject to restitution, review, and reputational consequence. They'd initial it. Brian had even chuckled at the wording. Now the clause had played out start to finish like a stage play she directed in silence. She hit send, watched the screen fade, took another sip of her drink, and for the first time in years, she felt it. Not revenge, not satisfaction, not even victory, just clarity. She hadn't burned the bridge. She'd walked away from it with the deed in her hand, sold the land underneath, and charged them rent for the ashes. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit.